It's spooky season, which always gets me talking with my buddies about the creepy things we've been through. I almost never touch on this story though, because it's not one of those classic scary stories everyone likes to share around a few beers. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. Night shift was a very small crew. 5 security, 5 of us running admin and packing. As admin staff, I sat with security as they switched between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually pretty silent and boring. Now, I'm not sure how the building got its haunted story. No one besides us ever wanted to work night because of the rumors. None of us ever had any experiences. No one died there. No crazy accidents happened. It wasn't destroyed and rebuilt. It was peaceful and uneventful. But stories always spread, as they tend to do with big, dark, creepy spaces. And it was creepy. It's surrounded with woods circled with fencing, mostly empty at night, which made it feel incredibly imposing and empty. Creepy motion-activated lights inside and out. Sounds carried and echoed. But still, none of us ever had any experiences there. Until that night. It was around Halloween, maybe a week or 2 before it. I was halfway into my shift, making it my lunch hour. It was chilly, and I went to my car to grab my bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door, which the fence runs closest to. It's maybe 10 yards off the back door. The only light is motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone, and the light cut out. I sat in the dark a bit, sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up and waved about to activate the light to find the ashtray. But as the light flickered on, I heard a noise at the fence across from me. We do get some animals out there, and they could get startled. It was all explained to me in my head instantly. But as I stood up, I heard the fence keep slightly jingling. When I looked up, I didn't see much. The light didn't really illuminate much outside its circle on the ground. I don't know why, but my first thought was to say, "Hello?" When I did, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness, trying to adjust. The light went out. There, in the darkness, the moon had a little more effect lighting up the area. The fence started lightly jingling again. Really lightly. As my eyes adjusted better, I saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence fidgeting with the links. I thought, this must be a kid trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and ghost hunt. Some high school kids have before without knowing the building never closed. And we were usually pretty cool with them poking around, as long as they didn't touch anything and made it fast, so they could run and tell their friends they lived through it. But that wasn't really common. And this one person, alone, it felt off. I radioed in with my walkie to desk security. "Hey, we have a visitor out by north door, behind the fence. I've seen the monitors of camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered. They'd be able to see the fence clearly." My walkie beeped back, and the voice said, "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" "Negative. They're fiddling with the fence, right in front of me." This all happened in the span of seconds. My cigarette butt was still in my hands, and I just barely swallowed my last sip of coffee. They didn't even have the chance to reply to me, when from the fence I heard this massively loud thrash of the lynx. And all I saw was the figure full-on sprinting at me. I made a terribly embarrassing choking noise and crushed my coffee cup against the knob, trying to rush myself in. The fence is so close, it's not going to take more than a few bounds to reach me. I pushed myself in so hard and held the knob in, trying to figure the deadbolt into place. The knob was flicking down hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. I radioed back, "Get down here, now!" But I already heard steps coming my way. The knob stopped moving by the time they got there. It was all over with. Back at the office, the security staff tried to play it off like I was having a laugh about it. Like this was a great Halloween joke I played. I didn't understand why they weren't taking it seriously until I saw the playback. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. My brain couldn't explain what I experienced outside while confronting the video. I immediately thought this was a big goof on me. Maybe they fiddled with the footage and had someone scare me. But they genuinely thought I was the one goofing with them. We were doing the whole back and forth, okay, whose idea was this? Who's messing with who? Until the second time we watched the playthrough. We noticed the way the door handle kept moving even when I removed my hand from it. Both the inside camera and the outside caught it. I noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside, the fence made a slight jolt, as if it was pushed. There were no holes in the fence or any kind of cuts made where someone could squeeze through. There were no creepy shadows, unexplained wisps of smoke, lights, or movements. Just me in the night, jumping out of my skin and running inside. I kept trying to think back to when I jumped, when that figure burst at me full speed. If the light activated for their movement or mine. I couldn't decide. I couldn't remember exactly. It was so fast. But nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. It was tricks of the moonlight, overactive imagination, and too much coffee. Branches against the chain links. No one's ever experienced anything weird here, and it wouldn't just start up here and now for no reason. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't want to argue it. They already thought I was being weird about it. I went about finishing my shift, but no one used the back door again that night, and it remained locked. The longest employed security guard was finishing up the shift at the desk with me in the office. It was before dawn. The morning shift was trickling in. He watched the cameras in silence while I typed away. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, "I never really liked the North End. It feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It's honestly the most he's ever said to me in the year plus I worked there. The most I've ever heard him say. I felt like that statement held even more weight for that alone. I didn't quit though. I stayed on another 7 months until the company was bought out, and they stopped overnight shifts to pile more work on day shifts for less money with less employees. There was never another incident. I never actually went out there again though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers. But I made excuses not to sit outside, to be honest. I feel like a few of us did. I have never, before or since, had any moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me. I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I keep thinking back at the door handle jerking down when I was steps back on the walkie. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. No one ever brought it up again, and whenever anyone asked about working at the old crappy factory, everyone would say, "Oh, we never saw anything up there. It's just a boring building at night." I would just smile and keep my side of the story to myself. But I wondered if anyone else was holding stories to themselves. Maybe they'd slip out after a few beers and field a few more questions about the haunted factory. This is a relatively old story that my dad has told me a few times over the years, but with Halloween here, it's been on my mind again. I myself have never been able to witness the house, though the description I've been given by multiple men 20-something years after seeing it gave me a very vivid mental image. To begin, I would like to mention that my father is a highly religious man and does not believe in ghosts or anything paranormal in the slightest. Nothing seems to spook him either, but he still swears up and down that he felt something unnatural that scared the crap out of him, even just from mentioning the story to me on the rare occasion that he would bring it up. Back in the late 80s, he and a few friends would regularly hike over the waterfall/creek bed behind our farm, and would follow the trails up until they eventually met the frontage road off of the interstate. Well, one night, they decide to take a different route to go around the backside of another farmer's land, mostly to see the animals because they owned emus and other large pets that weren't common in the local area. Supposedly, after leaving the area and continuing into the woods, at night of all wonderful times,
they managed to stumble upon what is described by all 5 men 20 years later as a Blair Witch House lookalike. It was a very, very old home, and my dad claims that just looking at it gave him this ominous feeling. But of course, they had to go inside and check it out. Inside the house was a vintage cottage-style home that was probably built in the late 40s or early 50s, and the group was instantly met with writing and symbols in strange, Latin-like languages, with a few English graffiti pieces that quoted a supposed satanic or pagan worshipping ritual, with certain pieces describing how to sacrifice a human soul, or some supposedly demonic deity. My father still claims to this day that certain symbols were painted on the walls in blood, while others were clearly spray paint. And I find it easier to believe because he also worked as a firefighter for years before this happened, and had a lot of experience with having to see human blood and dismembered bodies on the freeway after car accidents. Past a small living kitchen area was a stairwell that was so small that their shoulders would physically brush either sides of the wall as they went up. The stairs went straight, stopped at a small landing, then turned right, so as you stared up, you couldn't see what might be standing at the top. At the top of the stairs, a door led to a large attic-styled bedroom where actual chain manacles and locks hung from one of the walls near a circular window at the end of the room, which was also completely covered in weird symbols, graffiti, and now more obvious and frightening large dried puddles of blood that seeped into the floors and walls. Allegedly, once they were upstairs investigating the room, they swear they heard someone moving up the stairwell behind them quickly. But when they looked back, there was no one there. Everyone essentially told me that it sounded almost like heels clacking on wood. And now completely spooked, they rushed back down the stairs to see if someone was playing a prank on them and was hiding downstairs. Surprise, surprise, they found nothing, and no new footprints in the dust and grime that differed from the ones they left on their way in. To keep things interesting, I met with each of the guys separately to ask them about what they remembered, expecting to maybe find a crack or something to prove that maybe they were exaggerating. But when I asked them, I got the same answer from each of them with no hesitation. They got the same details right down to the minute that they entered the house and the minute they left. But here's where it gets really strange. They left the house and for some unknown reason decided to try walking back from a different route, using a compass to approach from the east instead of the south. They did this test more than 10 times that night, walking from every possible route or direction, yet they always came out at the front entrance of the house, even when the compass and common knowledge of the area showed that it was physically impossible to be at the south end of the house when they moved in a straight line from the north, east, or west. There probably is some scientific explanation for it, but I haven't found one yet. These guys knew those woods literally like the back of their hand, and still do to this day. The final time the guys came back and found themselves standing at the front door of the house, they began to feel physically ill and feverish, and finally decided that it's time to give up, when one of them nearly faints. And as they turn to leave, the man who nearly fainted turns, looks up, and points at the circular window at the front of the house on the second story. Everyone looks and immediately sees a tall female figure hunched over, standing in the window watching them. Though they saw no features on her face other than 2 large dark-colored eyes. At the sight of the figure actually moving, they all took off running through the woods, ending up on the side of the interstate about 3 miles from my dad's house, where they originally started from. They eventually make it back to my dad's place, though they claim that they felt as if someone was following them the entire way. My dad's cousin gets up to get some water from the kitchen, only to announce that he swore he saw the same figure standing outside of the kitchen window near the edge of the woods, close to the woodshed. Thankfully, nothing ever came from the experience other than a collective state of absolute terror when the subject was brought up. They wrote off what his cousin saw as paranoia or pareidolia. Though 5 years later, they decided to return to see if the house was still standing. Miraculously, It had fallen in on itself and was nothing more than a pile of rubble, and they never went back. I always joked with my dad and asked him what he would do if he went back and found the house standing the same way it had been back then. But with trespassing laws being far more prevalent in today's times, it would be nearly impossible without either getting shot or going to jail, as it wasn't our property. I don't know. It always gives me the creeps thinking about it, but I never considered the story to be true until I did this little mock interview with all of the guys. And when I say that these grown men are scared to death by this story, I mean it. Seeing them get physically worked up and frightened by just telling the story really caused me to be less of a skeptic. What do you guys think? Could it be possible that they were just spooked and it caused them to see things?